if you have these attachments, sometimes they can cause physical havoc on your body. And so I met this lady, and she warned me that I could get a little sick. Well, I got so sick that we had asked her to stop. She didn't. And these things started getting more violent. These attachments are pissed off, and they are screwing with my psyche, trying to change my perception of reality. I was exhausted, and my heart had stopped.
Our guest today is an award-winning author whose books explore her incredible journey through a rare neurological disorder, a near-death experience, and a spiritual healing. These experiences have inspired her to become a dedicated death and spiritual doula, guiding others through life's most profound transition. Brianna, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure having you here today. Thank you so much for making time out of your busy schedule to be with us. Now, Brianna, I understand that you had growing up certain experiences. So why don't you start us off by telling us about your life growing up and the experiences you had as a child?
Yeah, so I had a fairly normal childhood until about 10. And a good majority of it, I don't really remember. I mean, it was a pretty typical childhood. I had friends, I went to school, just kind of very typical. And then we moved as a family, and I had a street full of friends. I mean, there were probably 12 girls my age. They had sisters. The sisters were my sister's age. And I always had somebody to hang out with, something to do. And then we moved a few states over and to a really rural small town. And there's no one. There's like, it's a really small school, hardly, I don't know, maybe 100 people in my class, if even that. It could have been way less. I don't quite remember, but no one on my street, no one in my neighborhood, no one for a few blocks that was my age. So that was really devastating as a 10-year-old. And, trying to understand the transition of that and live life, I started experiencing some really weird physical symptoms. So my arm would twitch, and I would just get these really bad muscle aches in my calves and my forearms. And my parents thought it'd just be growing pains. And that's how it started. But okay, it's growing pains. I'm prepubescent. Maybe it's hormonal, adjusting to losing all my friends and everything I knew to this town. It was harsh. It was hard. And then I started getting horrific nightmares, and I started developing extreme insomnia on top of it, where I'd only sleep maybe 2 or 3 hours a night. I'd stay up till 3 or 4 in the morning and be up by 6 for school, and did very well in school. So it didn't affect that. No one knew that I wasn't sleeping because, my parents would probably get mad at me, or, I was worried about getting in trouble for not sleeping. Then when I did sleep, I usually had nightmares. So that was about 10 to 12. And around 11 or 12, I started experiencing some paranormal and metaphysical things. The paranormal things, I started seeing ghosts. And at first, it was very harmless. It was, a few people playing poker at a bar, and they'd be levitated maybe 18 inches off the ground, and they didn't have, I could see their legs and legs at the table or anything. They didn't bug me. They didn't scare me. I, didn't interact with them. I just observed. It was kind of just interesting. Then I started seeing these shadows, specifically this one that has a top hat and a cape, and it crossed the basement walls. And with it came a sense of terror and fear. And it was very different than these ghosts I'd been seeing. Not only did I see this guy, this entity, but I had church friends over, and they would see him. And unbeknownst to me, my sister was seeing him and her friends were seeing him. And we're all reporting it to my mom and we're not really talking to each other. And things just start getting kind of crazy and dark in this house. My sister also started seeing like animal ghost of animals that were probably she assumed to be sacrificed somewhere nearby. I'm not sure what gave her that idea other than the town was known for satanic and other rituals that, this need live offerings and stuff like that. So we're seeing all of these things. I'm not sleeping. I'm having nightmares. My weird symptoms are getting worse and weirder. I also start tremoring. My whole body just goes into the shaking, and it looks like I'm cold, but I'm not. And we have no idea what it is. We don't know if it's an allergic reaction or what. My other arm starts twitching. My legs start twitching. Then the other paranormal thing I saw, which scared me to my core, where I was in my guest bedroom and I believe it was evening, and this generational doll that we had, probably my great great grandmother's, had lost its eyes. I'm sure probably 50, 70 years ago. They're just painted on, had no eyes. But this doll, its eyes glowed red and it turned its head towards me. And that freaked me out beyond bounds. I was absolutely terrified. And I did tell my mom. Turns out a gentleman at our church had a doll do the same thing to him and his family on a house a town away, and he moved his whole family out of that house. So it was that level of creepy and scary. But kind of my church didn't really talk to us about what was going on. They said, "No, nothing's happening," or if you are experiencing stuff, your heart is bad, your heart's not in a good place. So I was struggling with that as a young child, like seeing all these things going on and my church saying, well, it's demonic, it's of the devil, your heart is bad, all this stuff. And while not sleeping, while having nightmares, while having this condition get worse that was still unknown. And that was kind of the gist of my prepubescent years. I started what every young girl usually starts around that age too. And it's just a whirlwind of horror, basically. I also started seeing auras around this time, and that was what I would consider metaphysical. And luckily, my mom was outside of the church for the most part. She definitely had her own spiritual journey and had a lot of questions that the church refused to answer. So she'd feed me these. It's actually a gift. You're seeing auras, their energy fields around people. It's beautiful. Here are some ways to enhance it. So she's feeding me all these metaphysical tidbits, and I'm reporting all these paranormal phenomena to her. My sister is reporting both metaphysical gifts and paranormal phenomena to her. And so she's kind of this like researching behind the scene how to help her kids, because definitely the church wasn't going to be there for us. So that was my childhood in a nutshell.
Wow. Wow. That's a lot there that you went through when you were younger. Thank you for sharing that. So, when you started reporting these scenes to your mom, to your parents, also when the church started questioning basically where your heart was as far as like why you're seeing this is bad, this, that, and the other. Then on the other side, your mom was telling you this is a gift, this, don't be afraid. How did those two different points of view affect your belief system and your religion?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, on one hand, I have the church saying, yeah, I'm getting sicker and sicker as I get older. So, by the time I'm 14 or 15, we start seeking medical help for what's going on. I start developing nerve pain and chronic headaches. I'm very insomniac, a lot of twitching. I'm now in full blown non epileptic myoclonic seizures. So, like, I'm having these seizures while conscious and coherent, and we're seeking help. And the church is, well, pray and God will heal you. And then so, we're praying. At this point, I am begging God. I do everything. Like, I go to different churches to see if I've just got saved wrong. I explore why these things are happening to me. What did I do? Why do I just, what did I do to deserve this? Why won't you heal me? Why aren't you listening? Why aren't you there? Why won't you answer? So I'm first was very, calling out to God this God that I was told to believe in. And then I get desperate and beg. And then I get angry. And this whole time, the church is like, well, we don't know what to do. Obviously, God doesn't want to heal you. Your heart's probably bad, and my dad's questioning where my heart's at this whole time. And then obviously this route isn't working. There's a lot of questions I have that won't be answered, that they won't answer. We're not getting help. We're not getting support. We're not getting support as a family from our church. So I knew something wasn't right. And I saw a bunch of other kids in my church that just went downhill throughout the teenage years as well. And so I think I inherently knew that something was very off in the church world. And with what my mom told me, she said it in such a way that wasn't it wasn't church or metaphysics. It was this beautiful blend, and she gave me scripture where Jesus says you can do all this and more. And it's like, oh, okay. And well, Jesus had these gifts and other people had these gifts. And so she softly introduced me to the community. It wasn't, going behind my dad's back or, behind the church, like, oh, they're wrong. This is right. It was a beautiful kind of marriage of the two concepts. And I'm so grateful for her for that. I didn't really understand. I really wasn't full of a lot of self confidence or self love at that time. So it's like, how is seeing energy a gift? No, it's like, what do you mean a gift? Then the metaphysical tied into holistic stuff. We tried a bunch of holistic things to help with my condition, and none of them really panned out. So I didn't know where I kind of lied because my church wasn't helping. The holistic community didn't really help. At least they weren't detrimental like my church and the medical industry was. So I was kind of just in this mode of survival, and I kind of gave up exploring what I believed even.
When you were going through these experiences in your teenage years, was that when you got diagnosed with your neurological disorder, or was it a little bit after, like in your 20s?
Yeah, so I'm going through all this in my teenage years. I still don't have a diagnosis. There's a couple doctors looking back that came close, but there were some that, oh, it's all in your head. It's a conversion disorder. It's psychogenic. It's function. It's all these things. Meaning, basically, we don't know what it is, so it's in your head. So, if we can't figure it out, it's got to be some screwed up part of your psychic or psyche. So I had to deal with that too. And at 18, I finally got a diagnosis. And the diagnosis is myoclonus dystonia. It's a neurological movement disorder. And this whole time, my mom was also my medical advocate. And she said, oh, Occam's razor, instead of it being, 20 different illnesses and syndromes and diseases, it's probably one. I forgot what Occam's razor specifically says, but usually it's the simplest explanation. And myoclonus dystonia covered just about every single one of my symptoms. It was a fairly new diagnosis when I was 18. And so they didn't know much about it. And we had already tried all the medication that they knew to try for it just based on symptomology. And so I thought with the diagnosis, there would be hope because, oh, we know what it is. We can help you. And it was, we know what it is and we can't help you. So 18 hit and nothing got more clear with this diagnosis. And so I at least had a diagnosis and I had finally starting to believe that it was real. And I kept it pretty mute as much as I could. I wasn't out there touting that I had this weird chronic unknown illness. And even when I was diagnosed, I still tried to keep it very much under the radar because I was determined to live a normal life. And what normal looked like was going to school, getting a degree, working my way up the career, corporate ladder, buying a house, starting a family, and all of that. So 19, I bought a house and I flipped it up. I flipped it. In the 5 years I went to college to get my degree in business. I started as a marketing professional in the construction industry, and I was determined to work my way up. And I did. However, in the background, I get more ill. There's nothing they can really do. They've tried everything they want to try. So I'm left to my own. Yeah, so I'm trying my best to live a normalish life, and yet I start astro traveling involuntarily in my early 20s. I'm still seeing these entities and ghosts and apparitions, all these kinds of very weird things. So in my day life, I'm trying to be a normal corporate, woman working her way up the ladder. And I'm still an extreme insomniac. And at this point, I'm starting to go days without sleep. And I mean, 2, 3, 4 days with zero sleep, not a cat nap, not a close your eyes and fall asleep for 10 minutes. I mean, zero sleep. And astro traveling involuntarily. And I end up in these other dimensions with these dark entities that have been plaguing me since my childhood. So things were not going well for quite a long time.
I think that it is so amazing that your mother was able to find a way to help you, in a way guide you through through those years in your life where you didn't really know what was going on, what you were experiencing. And then having the church saying one thing, because that can be traumatic for anybody. But not only would it be in a way hard for someone our age right now to be told that by the church, I cannot even begin to imagine what it was like for you hearing that from your church and from the people that were supposed to help you, guide you through it. So I think that it was amazing that your mother was able to find a way to guide you through that situation and help you instead of being afraid of it, which many of us did at that time, because this was not as well accepted. So it was not like you could go on Google and find information about it. Is that right? Was that your experience?
I never looked, but I'm sure my mom spent countless hours trying to find.
So, Brianna, can you tell us then what happened during your near death experience? How did that started? What happened that day?
Absolutely. So I took you through my early 20s with the involuntary astral travel. My illness is getting worse. The doctors have basically said there's nothing we can do for you. So I had a feeling from an early age. I mean, I think probably around the time all this started that I was going to die before I reached 28 years old. I just had this feeling. I told this to my mom, and then I've got this illness that is unknown. It's very painful, and it's progressive. And they were like, "No, it's not progressive." I said, "You didn't even know about it 5 years ago, so I'm not listening to you." So I sold my house and made a really nice profit. I flipped it, fixed it up, and sold it. And I decided I was going to move away to die. I was going to do my best at trying to live the best rest of my life there was, but I was positive that I would not be coming back. I would die to the place I moved. So I moved to San Antonio, Texas, and I rented a beautiful, stunning 2 bedroom, 2 bathroom apartment for just me. And it overlooked the pool and this hill on northern San Antonio. And it was amazing. It was, like one of the first luxury apartments. I think it was the first time I'd heard that term. There was amazing amenities, amazing community, and it was beautiful. So I moved there and I tried to live my best life. I'd explore when I could, and I tried really hard to do everything right and do my best. I don't know how long into my stay there because I don't think I lived there for more than a year. And it was I don't know how soon into after I moved. Assume I probably moved there around fall, and things started I was really, really sick. My myoclonus dystonia was just absolutely agonizing. My legs were cramping. My back was cramping. I had horrific nerve pain. I was still an insomniac. I just was miserable. So my mom, of course, she never ever gave up on this metaphysical side, the spirituality side, nor did she give up on this medical condition this whole time from onset of symptoms basically to, even nowadays, if I've got something going on, she's researching. So she'd always explored holistic approaches and spiritual approaches. And she came across a spirit release therapist, and that's something we hadn't tried. And knowing that I had seen these ghosts and these dark entities, and we had later found out that a Ouija board was played with in the home by a child and probably opened up a portal. They moved out of their dream home. It was their dream home, and they moved out of it in 5 years, probably because some weird crap was going on. So she's like, why not? Why not give it a shot? And I was all down for it. I said, you know what? I'm up for trying anything. And she had read that if you have these attachments, sometimes they can cause physical havoc on your body. Weird, crazy, unknown symptoms, and just really weird disorders. So I was for it. And, all of these holistic and other alternative medicines that we tried, Chinese herbs, chiropractic, acupuncture, massage, Reiki, hypnosis, meditation, none of them had any ill effects or anything. So I said, yeah, we'll try it. And so I met this lady on probably Zoom, or Skype or something. And we had a little session, talked about things. And she warned me that I could get a little sick, flu like symptoms. I had no idea why at this point that would happen, but I was like, okay, whatever, I'll be fine. Well, I did get sick, and it wasn't just a little. There were some really nasty attachments I had, and they did not want to leave. So she's working in the background, and I am just getting more and more ill. And this is all being done remote. We had that one meeting, and everything else was kind of behind the scenes. So I didn't know what was going on. And I'm starting to vomit a lot and just be married to the bathroom and not able to hold food down. Of course, my distrust of the medical field is very, very strong at this point. And so, especially because she said, oh, it's going to be a spiritual flu, I'm not going to go to the doctors and be like, yeah, I've got a spiritual flu. Can you help me? So I was just like, okay, this will pass. Well, I got so sick that we had asked her to stop or, pause for a time because I was really ill. And unbeknownst to us, she didn't. And I kept getting more and more sick, and these things started getting more violent. So here I am. My myoclonus dystonia is, I thought, in full swing. I am still an insomniac, not sleeping. These attachments are pissed off and they are screwing with my psyche, and they're planting images and, trying to change my perception of reality. So I'm having the spiritual warfare. Then I've also got this flu. It's more of an energy flu, but it feels just like a flu virus going on. And I am just exhausted. My parents decided they need to come down because I am so ill that they booked a flight down to San Antonio, Texas. And my mom and I were on the phone, she, doing our own prayer. We'd been praying for about 3 days. If I knew she needed some sleep. So I told her I was going to hang up and let her get some sleep. I knew that wasn't going to happen, but I knew that was the only thing that maybe would allow her to get some sleep because she was exhausted too at this point. And we hung up the phone, and at 2 a.m., April 27th, 2017, I I was exhausted. I was done. I could no longer do this. So they also, in those 3 days, I just said, oh, they're feeding on my fear. I'm not gonna be afraid anymore. So they've ranked it up a notch. They started physically attacking me. And so I hung up the phone, and I didn't know who God was. I didn't know who I believed in. I didn't know if I believed in anything. Because, I'd had this stuff with the church 15, I guess 10 to 15 years. I left the church at 16 because they were not helping and they were more damaging than anything. So I didn't know who I believed in. I didn't know if anything was out there or not. Yes, we'd been praying, but once again, I didn't know if that was doing anything. So I cried out. And when I cried out, it's not a verbal cry. It is a cry from the deepest part of my soul with everything. And I said, I can't do this anymore, and it's in your hands. And with that, I surrendered everything. I said, whatever happens, happens. Like, I cannot do this. I'm done. And in that instant, when I cried out from my soul, from my every essence of my being, these things got ripped from me and everything fell silent and peaceful. It's like the world stopped. It's like hundreds of fans in a stadium were all silent, and weight of a million boulders was lifted from my chest, and the whips from 100 cattails had been stopped, and all the pain ceased, all the noise ceased, and there was this beautiful peace and serenity I'd never felt while I'd been on this earth so far. And I was in bliss, and I felt this tapping on my hands, the palms of my hands and my feet, and I heard this big booming voice ask, "Are you ready?" And it wasn't external, it wasn't really internal, it was just kind of the same place that I called out from. Although it wasn't me calling out, I didn't hesitate to say yes. Something had happened, something had changed, something had answered my prayer. So exclaimed yes with that same soul that cried out. And at that moment, I felt 3 really hard pounds on my chest and my heart had stopped. I was immediately detached from my body.
Before we go into more details about what you experienced on the other side, you mentioned that when you were younger, you saw this figure with a top hat and a cape, and that you felt a lot of fear and terror. I've heard other people in the spiritual community saying that lower density or lower realm beings, they do feed on your fear. So the more fear you have, the more they eat, so to speak, and then they cost more and more and more. Do you think that that's what started this whole situation? Because before you were seeing spirits, but they were not paying attention to you. You were just an observer until then.
So a couple of things. My sister saw these things that I saw, right? She experienced this, but she never had the attachment that I did. She never had the nightmares and the involuntary astral traveling and kind of this horrific side effect of these entities. But she also wasn't sick. And as a sick child, and an insomniac, also who was early stage puberty, lost all my friends. I was already low energy, low vibration. So all of those things, I had no defense. And my church said, "Well, if you're safe with Jesus, you don't need a defense." And that was a huge disservice because it's a very different thing to, believe in Jesus as your savior and where you're going to go versus what is really happening in this realm with these low vibrational entities. And so I didn't have any defenses and I was weak energetically, and I was fearful. I was fearful because I was in pain. I wasn't sleeping. I didn't have friends. I didn't really understand the church. They didn't understand me. So all of these things, I believe, let them in and attach to me. Whereas my sister had a very different experience. She had a high energy shield and she had friends, she wasn't sick and she could sleep and all of this stuff. And she had a better understanding of who she was on a spiritual level where I didn't. And so she had this protection and I didn't. And I think that's what sent me down this, next decade and a half of horror that she didn't experience.
And it would make sense. That makes sense for me at least, because I do understand that the higher your vibration, meaning taking care of yourself, sleeping well, resting, and all that, that brings up your vibration, which makes it a little bit more challenging for those energy beings or lower beings to attach to you. I understand that you were a kid, you didn't know how to handle that, and things were happening to you, and you didn't have any control of that. So that I never went through anything like that, but I cannot even begin to imagine how you were feeling during those times.
Scared, definitely scared, which that's what they wanted. They fed on that fear and then they produced more of it. So they had this endless supply.
Exactly. Now, you mentioned that you heard a voice during your near death experience asking you, "Are you ready?" So tell us what happened after that.
Yeah. So as soon as my soul exclaimed yes, that's where my heart stopped and I was completely absent from my body. I wasn't even aware of a body or earth or any of this. I wasn't aware that my name was Bree, but I was aware of my consciousness. And I was nothing but consciousness. I had no body or anything. I was in this black void. I keep saying void. I think maybe just because I hear that term so much. But and I didn't see anything. I didn't hear anything, but I felt everything. So it was all the energy of the universes of the I don't even know. Just it was everything. And in that space I was with the creator. And this creator was the one who I had called out to. I didn't know who I was calling out to, but it was the one who rescued me from a situation, and I was home. I was in love and awe and energy. Everything was just pure energy, and it was beautiful. Even though you couldn't see anything, it was absolutely beautiful. But my consciousness knew something had shifted drastically. And while I was unaware and unfamiliar with this person called Bree, this human experience, this earth realm, my consciousness knew something had changed and asked, am I dead? And out of the blackness, out of nowhere, these three monks appeared. And they are just smiling, kind of laughing at me, as if to say, if you only knew. I didn't know what they meant at that time, so I just thought, okay, that's curious. And they float back into the darkness, and I end up in this brilliant, bright blue, almost white. The blue is so bright, it's almost white tunnel. And I'm going through it at supersonic speed. I'm still just a spiritual body. There's binary code all around the tunnel, ones and zeros going past me at supersonic speed. I know my soul is being downloaded with all this incredible information. I don't know what it is. I just know it's incredible. And it was just magnificent and very, very exciting. And after that point, I ended up in this white space. It wasn't really a room. There was no walls or doors or ceilings or floors, but it was this expansive whiteness. And behind me, there was I likened the energy to an ascended master teacher. I never saw him. It felt masculine. And because of my religious upbringing, I liken him to Jesus. But I also understand had I come up from a different culture or religion, it could have also been Muhammad or Krishna or Buddha. You can go on and on and on. I don't know who it was. It was just this really powerful ascended master teacher. And in front of me is this huge pile of black numbers. And I get so excited. This is the first time I have an actual human looking body, even though I still don't remember anything about Earth or human, void of my ego still. And my human like body picks up these numbers and throws them in the air and exclaims, no wonder you love creating. And it was like with such childlike enthusiasm that it still cracks me up that I was so excited to know that the universe was created math, because I am so not a math nerd at all. I think it's so funny that I had a binary code tunnel. I'm excited about this pile of numbers. And then in the next space that I end up, there's more math and it's hilarious. But in that part, I understood that the universe was created in math and numbers, and it was so exciting. I transitioned from that very quickly into the place I had the most experiences in, and still unfamiliar with Earth, but looking back, it's kind of reminiscent of Earth. There was, a town, there were trees, there were utility poles, there was a little store, and there was machines and ladders, and it looked kind of like a weird Earth, I guess. So I'm there and I'm no longer in a human like body. There's other beings there. And say beings because I don't know if they were ever human or not. They just were other beings, other spiritual bodies. And they kind of look like these little munchkin dolls. I can't think of the name, but I've seen it somewhere. And it's probably this weird toy we had in the 90s. They're all just kind of little doll-like people and just working around in the town. And I see some sliding down trees that are covered in snow. And I just have the thought, I like snow. And instantly, I'm on the trees, sliding down the tree branches, but it's not snow, it's green, it's lush moss. And I realize, oh, if I don't like snow and I'm experiencing this in lush greenery, but they like snow, maybe they're experiencing their own reality in snow while I'm experiencing my reality in green, but we're experiencing these experiences together simultaneously, but different. And it was not that convoluted. This experience, it was just so matter of fact, like, oh, that's neat. But here, trying to explain that in this earthly, very one time oriented, one dimension reality is very difficult. It gets very convoluted. So I thought that was really, once again, just really curious and cool. Another experience I had that manifested instantly was I saw some beans flying and I wanted to give it a go. So at this point, I've got like a robotic body and I'm trying to fly and I suck at it. And I end up severing my robotic arm on a utility pole. There's no pain, there's no fear. It's just like, oh, what's going to happen? And so I watched my arm grow back with binary code, kind of like reheal itself with binary and then just, come back together. It was really, once again, oh, curious and cool. Another point, I was a snowman. And I do get the irony of not liking snow and becoming a snowman. I still haven't realized the purpose of that other than the universe is got a really sick sense of humor. But I'm a snowman and I see these beings working on a machine that has a flame out of the end of it. And I wonder if I get too close to that, will I melt? Instantly, I'm under the machine and I'm melted and I have a puddle of eyes. I think, anyone put me back together? And instantly they put me back together. So the creation of thought was instantaneous. There was no essence of time. Here, I say we're blessed with time because if you think you're going to go get run over by that car over there, in my experience, that would happen instantly. But here, you would feel pain, you would experience physical death, all this horrible stuff. And here we can be like, oh, why don't I just not go run out in traffic? So we have the blessing of time, which is great for our circumstances here. And other things that happened in that part of there was so much in that part of my experience. I could go on about it probably alone for a good 30, 45 minutes. But the other thing was just how connected everyone was and how not a single word was ever said. And we communicated faster than telepathy, other than telepathic means. So you think of our telepathic communication, you have a thought, someone receives it, reads it, sends one back, and that's silent communication. But there was not that. It was so fast. It was even faster than that. We just all did things as one and just instantly knew. And it was really, really cool to experience the unity of all that. We didn't know each other. It was just a huge sense of community, even though we were all strangers. So that was the other really powerful part of that part of my experience. And as they all, not all of them, but a good majority, we all are at this barbed wire fence that I can't see behind. It's all blurry. But there's an opening and some of them are walking through it. And I wasn't asked if I could go. I just knew that I was not allowed to go and they're going to someplace beyond and I wasn't allowed to go for whatever reason. And after that, I end up in a flat, like a dark room with 7 magnificent beings behind me. I don't know who they are. I, didn't know enough about scripture to see if they're, if it was in the religion I grew up in or other religions. I've heard some different theories, but I still don't know specifically who they were. Just not as significant and powerful as the creator I met in the void, but more so than the ascended master teacher. They're somewhere in between. And there's this beautiful scroll just in front of me and a quill writing golden sparkly script on it. And it's got the most amazing, juicy information on it. And my ego comes back. It's like, oh, you shouldn't show this to a human. But that's not what it said. They said, ha, we're showing this to a human. And just like that, the text went away and the roll scrolled up and I was snapped back into my body. with no recollection of what the scroll said. And when I was snapped back into my body, I felt my heart start again. And that is a feeling I will never, ever forget.
Wow, that is incredible. Again, another incredible story about what happens after we die. In a way, many of us wonder what we're going to be experiencing. And especially if you were raised in a religious family, it's either one way or not, one place or another. So it's always good to hear these stories about people that have had the opportunity to cross that threshold up to a certain point and then come back and kind of like report to us. I understand that you met with the creator and you met those seven beings that you don't really know who they were. But what about those 3 months at the beginning of your experience? Who do you think those were?
Oh, I love that you asked. So I don't know if they have some connection to me. I should explore that. I should see why those 3 months came to me in my experience. I have never been asked who they were specifically. And I should dive into that. Thank you. But I do know why they were laughing. It took me 6 years to figure it out, but they're laughing because I asked, am I dead? But dead and death is not a thing. So they were laughing because I asked if I was a thing that does not exist. And that was really funny. But this is telling me that, or like, you'll figure it out one day. And yeah, I don't know who they are. Maybe somewhere in my ancestral line, so somewhere in my soul family. I'm not really sure. I have no idea why monks appeared. I was not raised in Buddhist or Tibetan religion. I think they're Tibetan based on their uh, robes, but I have no idea. That's a great.
Good hair. They were there to help you, I guess. That's amazing. Now, so tell me, coming back, once you realized you were in your body, that feeling of this humongous energy, this humongous soul that you are being shrunk back in the body. How was that for you?
Awful. First off, I was petrified because I realized something happened, and I think my consciousness knew I had died because when I came back into my body, I was positive I had been dead for months. And my wishes were always to be cremated. And I was like, oh my gosh, my parents are just so mortified. They were so upset that they disregarded my wishes to be cremated. They buried me. I'm in a coffin underground. Now I got to figure out how to get out of here. Like, I refused to open my eyes. I was so scared because it felt like months. And I was so petrified. I started playing out all the scenarios and well, I can still breathe and I don't feel like a hard floor, like a hard board behind me. So maybe I'm not very, it's still not opening my eyes. I'm still processing all of this. And I was, okay, maybe it hasn't been that long, but I knew my parents were supposed to come. Maybe it's only been a week, something happened. I'm going through like this crazy anxiety thing of what just happened and what am I going to open my eyes and see. So when I finally before I opened my eyes, I also wanted to get back to that space so badly. Mind you, I was coming from torment and hell, physical, spiritual, emotional, mental hell before this experience. And in this place, there was none of that. I didn't even, hey, the half the time I didn't even have a physical body. There was no physical pain. There was no mental anguish. It was all just pure love, curiosity, and joy. I didn't have a spiritual dilemma because I was just whole. I was my authentic spiritual self. My emotions were just highly elevated. I was very excited and loved and all of that. So I wanted to get back. So I tried deep breathing. I tried not breathing. I tried begging. I tried calling out again, and nothing was working. So I finally opened my eyes and I realized I was still in the same place. And I was very confused. I was like, okay, well, it's still dark out. Maybe it's, like a week later or a few days. And I look at my phone and I'm trying to comprehend that it's saying the same date. And I was thinking, there's no way. There's no absolute way that it's the the same date. And then I saw the time and only 8 minutes had transpired. And I was just flabbergasted. So that was the first part of coming back that was really overwhelming, that I couldn't believe all this had happened in 8 minutes. But as far as some other things, I felt like I'd been stuffed into a sausage casing. I told my mom that pretty soon. They arrived the next day, and I felt like I'd been stuck. I was in this sausage casing, and the walls freaked me out so bad. Walls and desks and everything was so solid. And it took me a really long time to realize that it was because I was this huge expansive energy that was changing and flowing and adapting and all this to this very slow, dense world.
Okay. And what happened when you came back and you finally opened your eyes and you realized that only 8 minutes had passed by? What happened when your parents came over? Tell me what happened after that experience.
Yeah, I don't remember the rest of the night, but it was calm. There was no more attacks of these entities. I didn't have any pain. I remember talking to my mom when she had got in sometime the next day and telling her this experience. And I didn't know anything about, like I said, I didn't do any of the research. I was not interested in metaphysics. I wasn't interested in spirituality or religion. None of that, because nothing was working for me as a kid and a young adult, so I didn't bother. And I was in survival. My goal was to do the best I could, and that was not spending my time doing research. So I didn't know what a near death experience was. I knew very little about anything other than what had happened with me, and the astral traveling. My mom kind of explained to me about the aura stuff. She explained to me I'd gone to some psychic fairs, but for the most part, I hadn't heard of this thing called near death experience. But I'm telling her everything that happened since I'd hung up the phone with her. And I don't know what's going on in her mind, but at the end of it, she said, "You had a near death experience. I think you should look into it." I said, "No, that's creepy." And she actually got me hooked up with JD Thompson, who is known in Boulder for helping people integrate with near death experiences. Like Christina Hawley, I think is her name. And so they kind of helped early on. My mom instantly got me some help because she had read about near death experiences. Her mom had started supplying her with these metaphysical and spirituality books when my grandma was around 40, and I don't know how old my mom was, but my grandma started feeding my mom this information. My mom started looking at this information when we were young kids. And so she knew about near death experiences, out of body, all these different things I never heard of. So she didn't throw me in, but she highly suggested I join IANS and get a hold of these two people who helped with near death experience transitions. So I heard people's thoughts. I was able to, I don't even know what you call that gift, but it didn't feel like a gift. It was kind of scary when I heard some really negative thoughts, and I could feel people's pain. So if we drove up by past a car accident, I could tell you exactly where they're injured based on where I felt it. So it was very overwhelming, and I was in a whole new state of survival. I'd gone from this Malconus dystonia, paranormal metaphysical hell, to this overwhelming opening of these spiritual gifts that I didn't know what to do with or how to utilize, and it was very scary. So I actually I didn't do very well the next 6 months at all, mentally or emotionally.
At this moment, by this time, when you were experiencing these spiritual gifts, hearing people's thoughts, their pains, and things like that, what was your diagnosis with your condition?
Yeah. So because I was so overwhelmed with all of these new gifts, I didn't realize that all my symptoms that would plague me all day, every day had vanished. I was not twitching, I was not cramping, I had no nerve pain. So a bunch of that had ceased and I didn't realize it. I was such in a state of survival in a different way that I didn't notice my symptoms were gone. And so that's one to say how intense the afterward is. So people who say, "Oh, I just wish I could have an NDE," and I tell people there are so There are so many easier ways of understanding, coming into your gifts, opening up your spirituality. And what does this fly do? Opening up this spirituality than having an NDE, because for a lot of us it's very traumatic and it is overwhelming. So I didn't know for another or 18 months after my NDE did I realize my symptoms had dissipated completely.
That's amazing. I mean, you were busy sporting new gifts. I'm trying to navigate through those too. And what I find fascinating about your story, Brianna, is that you had this women in your life, the motherly figure in your life, that they were interested and they were guiding you through that. I think that's a very fortunate to be in that situation, despite what happened in your life, all those experiences, because many people do not have that support. So, what can you tell people that maybe are going through similar situations as far as having these new gifts and they don't have anyone in their family or in the circle to guide them through that and help them out and kind of like give them a helping hand?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I just want to first express my utmost gratitude for my mom. She's been so instrumental, and there's no way I would have survived any of this without her by any means. So I'm so extremely, extremely grateful. Early on at 17, she said we had signed up for this as a soul contract, and I had no idea what she meant by that. I've done a lot more research now. I'm very spiritual now, do a lot of research, and I completely understand what she meant. And I am so grateful that we have this soul pact together. But for people who don't have that, which is a majority of people in this situation, either their family doesn't understand or their family life led them to whatever scenario led them to their NDE. Sometimes it's abuse or drugs or whatever. When you don't have that support of your family, we also are so blessed with the internet nowadays. 2017 ish, it was kind of up and coming, but there wasn't this huge virtual community. And I'm connecting with people all around the world, and more people are coming out, sharing their NDE experiences, writing books, talking on podcasts. So if you're just starting out on this journey, please join. I mean, you don't have to pay. You can join IANS as a non-paying member. They have so much detailed their information on their website. It's ians.org, I believe. And you can find communities, free sharing groups that meet all the time and connect with. You can choose a soul family. You don't have to rely on your physical blood family. I know it can be really hard to not have that support. And a lot of people get divorced. They fought with their families because there's just this huge miscommunication. And I think we also get to choose our soul family. And there are so many people out there wanting to help other people through these experiences. So use the internet and find your soul tribe. And if you start with IANS, there are so many other organizations, but that one has so many free resources and really helped me that's where I would start.
Thank you so much for that message. It's really inspiring, and especially people. I know it's hard because if I was in your shoes and my mom said to me, "Well, we chose that," I'm like, no, no, I didn't. I'm pretty sure that I would be like that. Like, why would I be so hard on myself? I grew up Catholic, so the religious beliefs were very, from my experience, was very strict. So at that time, I would have never thought to even think of, oh, I chose this family, I chose this situation, I chose this lesson. So it's really important for people to understand that although it might be difficult, we choose certain things for our soul growth. And it really depends on how we handle that. And very important to know that you're not alone. Find help. Very important. People use your resources, finding your tribe, and all of those things that you said, very, very important. So thank you for that. Going back to your experiences, Brianna, you mentioned that 18 months after your near death experience, you noticed that your symptoms were no longer there. So you were cured. And I was watching you in another interview, and you mentioned that you went back to your old life and then your old belief system. So tell us what happened.
Yeah, so soon as I start realizing that I don't have these symptoms anymore. So in that 18 months, I actually took drastic measures to try to get back to that space. I mean, I'm not saying an NDE is not traumatic at all because it was so traumatic. I tried taking my own human life again to get back to that space because life here was so dense and the aftermath was so hard to deal with, even with a great support. You know, I had two, professionals. I had my mom's support, my sister's support. I had support and it was still really hard. So because of that attempt to go back there, I actually ended up in a 4-day coma and brain injury. So then I had to spend 6 months with BT recovering from that. So there was a lot of craziness in that 18 months, but about 12 to 18 months and afterwards, I'm recovered from that brain injury. I'm recovered from, kind of all this spiritual craziness. And I said, oh, okay, I'm not having these symptoms anymore. I must have been cured. I've heard people get cured in their near death experiences. I must have been, it must have happened. That's amazing. And I was like, now I can really crush it at work. I can go back and be the best. Yeah, my job. I can climb all the corporate ladder. I can make all the money, do all the things. And so I go back to my old, I didn't know any different. I went back to thinking the same thoughts. I went back to the same routine. I went back to the Brie before the NDE, basically, without the pain or the paranormal stuff. So my illness recreated itself. And I was devastated because I finally was like, okay, I had this near death experience. This is my proof. I was healed of manifold dystonia. That's the proof I needed. And then I went on Jeff Mara podcast. I told my story. It was the first time I told anyone publicly, but he was small. YouTube still wasn't too big. And it was a pretty small channel. And I felt very safe by going on Jeff Mara's podcast. Not too soon after that, my condition came back. And then I was devastated. I was now, oh my gosh, I'm a failure. I'm a fraud. I didn't have a near death experience. I didn't get cured of myoclonus dystonia. Oh my God, what was all this about? So then I got into another phase of my life where I'm back in survival. Luckily, the paranormal stuff and dark entities never came back, but the myoclonus dystonia did, and it came back with such a vengeance that by 2021-ish, I had lost my independence. I couldn't walk very well. My legs were so cramped up. My back was so cramped up and dystonic. I was having these non-epileptic myoclonic seizures, hitting myself, hitting other people, throwing things, breaking things. My nerve pain was off the charts. My anxiety was off the charts. My insomnia was off the charts. So I was kind of like, I don't know what all of this is about. Like, why? And then it wasn't until, so I actually went through brain surgery. They finally approved me for an experimental brain surgery for this condition. And it was pretty successful at first. But they say myoclonus dystonia is cunning and will probably learn how to rewire you know, regardless of the brain surgery. But in that time that I had symptom relief, I left corporate America and went soul hunting. I went hunting for my soul and understanding. And in that, I was told to stop feeding my ego and start feeding my soul, leave corporate America, and do something that fuels my soul. So I said, okay, how do I do that? They said, well, you're going to write some books. I hate reading. You're going to write some books. All right. So I wrote my first book about my near-death experience, officially coming out of the NDE closet and severing that tie with corporate America. That was the first step. Then I found a thing called a death doula, and I got certified and started my own death doula business and practice. And then I started diving into how to rewrite subconscious programs. How do I heal things written out of survival? How do I connect with myself? So I went on this quest and met this amazing woman in my tiny town that I'm living in now. And she had a near death experience. She had worked with Dr. Joe Dispenza on stage, and she understood that I had already done so much of the shadow work, the inner child work, the trauma work, that I was ready for the next step. And she sent me to a meditation retreat. She said, get yourself, it's sold out. Just get yourself there and get in. And so I took my first leap of faith and I drove to this meditation retreat without a ticket. And just, I got in, and it was incredible. And I never knew what meditation really was. I'd only heard of mindfulness meditation. And, that's being very focused on your 3D physical senses. And this type of meditation was taking you out of it. And so I'm studying on my way to this retreat, trying to dive in and taking all these courses and learning more. And what he's talking about is, going into nowhere, nothing, nobody, no thing, no time. And I was like, oh my God, that's the void I was in. Okay, all right, let's get on board. And I got the language I needed to get back into that space I was in my near death experience. So on the second day of this meditation retreat, and first actually real attempt at this type of meditation, and I left my body and I was detached. I had no body. I was in nowhere. I was nothing. There was no time. And I was in this black void again. And in this void, just like the monks appeared, I saw my heart, my brain appear out of the darkness, and a piece of binary code from my tunnel of my near death experience come and circulate through my brain and my heart and rewire things. And I just knew when I just saw, and I was in awe and joy and amazement and curiosity, just like in my near death experience. And in that, I knew that I was being healed of Macronus dystonia. And so the next day, I shut off the deep brain stimulator that they gave me for the myoclonus dystonia and waited. And usually I could tell any change within a few seconds. Nothing happened. Minutes go by, hours, a day, 2 days, the whole week, month, more months, year, etc. And I knew that, and I know, and I knew then that I was healed of myoclonus dystonia, and that we have the ability to heal ourselves. And that just blew my mind. I started becoming a spiritual doula, teaching people how to become their authentic spiritual self, how to unlock that divine power within them and everything. But that was the day I re-healed.
That is amazing. That's beautiful. So you are a death and spiritual doula. Can you explain to us what is a doula and what is the difference between a death doula and a spiritual doula?
Yeah, I would love to. So a doula in general is a holistic support person, non-medical. The term first came up as birth doulas, and those are going to be your midwives, birth doula, birth keeper, helping lives transition into the world. Then the term came up for death doula, and that is basically helping with the transition out of this world. A spiritual doula helps with the transition of you birthing into your authentic spiritual self. And that can look like shedding layers of you that don't serve you, don't serve your purpose. So in essence, I'm a support person for end of life challenges, grief, illness, and spiritual awakening.
Thank you so much for that. Brianna, tell us about your books. Where can people find your books? What are the name of the books? And what do you expect people to get from reading your books?
Yeah, so you can find everything about me, all the podcasts, books, the services, anything you might be curious about on my website, which is BRI, the number 0, NICLLC.com. But also you can find all the books on most major book resellers. Barnes & Noble is a great one. Ebooks, if you want an ebook version. Amazon carries most of them, but My first book, White Flame, is really about the paranormal metaphysical journey that led to my near-death experience. That is going to go into detail about the paranormal things I saw, the dark astral traveling involuntarily, the auras, and my near-death experience go into more detail about what I experienced there and a little bit of the chaos that ensued afterwards. That book was written before I healed again. So, and I didn't understand how the NDE and the illness were related until later. So that one is purely, mostly, it's got just a little bit of illness, but mostly on the spiritual realm and is written for the spiritual community. People have had these unique, unknown, unusual NDEs that aren't well talked about on IANs or these big stories about these life reviews or past, family members coming to see you, the pearly gates or anything. This is, if you have these experiences that are unlike your other stories you hear, this is aimed to help you know that you're not alone, and that these crazy things exist to, good people. The second book is Wired to be Dysfunctional. That one is solely written for the medical community or patients or caregivers or advocates. It is very medically based. It details my journey with the myoclonus dystonia. So that is really powerful for anyone going through a chronic illness, anyone caring or being an advocate for someone going through a chronic illness, a mom and a child situation, or parent and child situation, or even people in the medical field because we're so mistreated that we're trying to help even medical professionals who want to do better. Then the third book, Leads to Nowhere, is more of a self-help version. It's where I learned how intertwined my illness and my NDE were, exploring the depths of healing, how to do it, how to start to let go of your old identity to build your new identity, not to fall back into an old one once you heal, and how to get to the space of healing. So those are the three books about my story. And I was asked to write Alan Jones' spiritual journey recently as a death doula and as a writer. I wrote his awakening story, which happened over a 30-year span. He went from a software aerospace Smith engineer to a very different person. And he had a near-death experience, a couple of rebirths, some crazy regressions, and a really cool spiritual journey. And all of that you can find online.
Would that be on your website that people can go find your books and schedule sessions with you?
Absolutely.
Okay. Do you have any last messages, positive messages for the audience?
Yeah, it can feel like you are very alone. And even when you have a beautiful spiritual community like we have, it can still feel very lonely. But there's always somebody out there who's willing to listen, who wants to listen, who wants to help, who wants to share, whether that's booking a session with me or just sending me a message. You can send me emails all day long or going to the internet. There are thousands of resources nowadays. I just don't want anyone to think that they have to go through this alone, that no one will understand because we are coming out of a phase of sleep. We're awakening as a whole, and more people are talking about this and sharing, and that I am positive you can find someone to be there for you and with you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for ending us in that note, Brianna. It was a pleasure having you here with us. Thank you for coming on the show.
It was such an honor. Thank you.